Okay, so as been mentioned, my name's Tim. I'm the director of a game development company in Dunedin called Runaway. We make games inspired by the natural world and are what the games unit of documentary filmmaking company Natural History New Zealand. This talk is going to be a bit of a whirlwind ride. It comes at a pretty interesting time in the development of our company as we've seen our latest product, Flutter, released in February, perform really exceptionally well compared to our portfolio before it. So we've done a lot of soul searching about what it is, where it is that we go from here, and what it is that we can try and do better than anybody else in the rest of the world. So I'm going to go through the design methodology that we use to create Flutter, but also some of the background values that went into developing the focus of our portfolio as a whole. So this is our studio down in Dunedin. Our core team is very small. We've just got 5 full-time developers. And then we use a network of outsourcers around the world, from artists, graphic designers, sound designers through New Zealand and the United States to create our products. We were formed 4 years ago as the games division of Natural History New Zealand. So Natural History have a 30-year history in making documentary television for National Geographic, Discovery Channel, all those big factual clients. And I was brought in to NHNZ to look at how we could take that passion for the natural world and that expertise in telling incredible stories about real creatures and bringing it into the game space. And so there's really that passion and storytelling capability in the DNA of the company. So the first mobile game that we did was one called Puzzle Planets, and this was a contract with National Geographic. The idea was that we were gamifying the concepts of plate tectonics and the forces that went into creating planets. So you can see here there was a 3D puzzle of putting together a planet, and then you would smash the tectonic plates together to create continents that rise out of the ocean and then spread life over that planet and see different species evolve based on what sort of planet it was. Our second game, again in partnership with National Geographic, was called Howling Mouse, based on this little critter called the Arizona grasshopper mouse. And it's called Howling Mouse because the dude howls at the moon to mark his territory. And this is an interesting one. We wanted to make something which was like a one-button platformer, something which was much more simple and pick up and play, but it still had that differentiator that it was connected to a real-world critter. And so this game did really well for us, if not like financially, definitely in terms of promotion. So its primary goal was to promote the new Nat Geo Wild brand, which is a channel focused specifically on animals. Its target was 50,000 downloads. It did over 300,000. It's been played over 3 million times now. So that was great as a promotional exercise. But we were still figuring out how to really make money with these games. They were commissions, they paid the bills, but we hadn't really hit the big time yet. Our most recent development, Flutter, as opposed to working with a television channel, this time we worked directly with a global game publisher. So it was published in partnership with a company called DNA, whose Western office is in San Francisco. And we worked with them very closely, not just in funding the game, but in refining its monetization mechanics, its gameplay to make sure that it was retentive enough and monetized well enough for it to be a profitable product, which I'm very proud to say that it's gone on and become. What I want to do before I get into the specifics of this game is really go into some of the founding thinking as to why we decided to focus on nature as a differentiator and the sort of founding values. So I've been asking myself a lot recently. I turned 30 at the end of last year, and we had this big, oh, woe is me, what am I doing with my life moment. At the same time, really, as we were getting to this point, this real, anxious moment, as Claudia was pointing out before at the end of last year, that we were about to launch this game, and we were trying to figure out, why is it that we are focused on this differentiator, apart from the fact we came from, NHNZ. But I looked back into my sort of personal game playing career, and tried to figure out why it was that games had really resonated with me, and why I wanted to create them as well as actually play them. So a very big soul-searching moment for me. And I looked back on all the games that really made a profound influence on me. And I think my probably earliest memory in life is playing a game. I knew from when I was 8 or so that I wanted to be involved with them, but it was really this moment when I was probably 13 when I played Final Fantasy VII for the first time. And I remember running home from school, even though it was only 5 minutes walk away. I literally sprinted home from school every day to come and get back into this world. This presented something which, a set of characters and a setting and a story, and a struggle that I, cared so passionately about that, I was more engaged with that than I was with the issues of real life. So I started to realize here that games had this incredible power to tell these stories that could really influence people. Another sort of series of works that really influenced me a lot was that of Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli. Nausicaa is one of my favorite, not just films, but my favorite, one of my favorite stories. The learning here was that films could be so much more than simply passing entertainment. They could present an ideal or a concept that really stays with the player or the viewer far beyond the images on the screen during the 2 hours of the movie. Nausicaa for me has this incredible sort of message about your responsibility to the planet, even though it's based in this sort of fictional setting. But another interesting thing that sort of impacted me when I was little was just realization that not only could stories teach a theory, but they could actually even have a positive impact on you through their gameplay and teaching you actual fact. When all the kids in primary school were out in the playground, like on the jungle gym and stuff, I was inside playing Where in the World Was Carmen Sandiego. And subsequently, it was that geography was the only subject that I was any good at in school, because I was learning about all the different places from around the world. I didn't play Carmen Sandiego because I wanted to learn about geography and all the different like capital cities and monuments and things all around the world. It was a byproduct of the fact that it was a very well designed game, but it uses these playing pieces of real world fact as its gameplay model, and that stuck with me. So all this sort of realization that games can be this incredibly influential, inspiring, and potentially even educational medium, got me thinking about what our place is in the App Store economy. All right, we've chosen to be in the App Store, and it's an incredibly competitive space. When you think about the fact that there are 900,000 apps on the App Store right at the moment, you need to be something pretty damn special to actually stand out and to make something of any commercial significance. One of the main tests to just see whether your mobile game is worthy of a player's time is whether it passed the Starbucks test, which is can somebody have a meaningful interaction with it in the 30 seconds that they're waiting for their vanilla latte, frappuccino, whatever. When they have that moment spare in their day, how do you embed yourself so deeply in the psyche of that player that when they pull out their phone or before they've even gone to reach for it, they think to spend that gap of time in your game? And so thinking further about it, I sort of realized that this is really the same as basic motivational psychology. As an entrepreneur, I read a lot of books from different designers and entrepreneurs and motivators about how we find productivity and happiness and things. So this is a time where our theory on business and game design really started to interact and overlap with our theory of entrepreneurship and what we wanted to achieve with our business. A couple of my heroes that really started to influence me for a start was Jane McGonigal. Jane wrote an amazing book called Reality is Broken. And her key theory is that games can change the world. She wants to see a game designer win the Nobel Peace Prize by, I think, 2020 something. One of the main theories behind her work is that games can be a positive influence on people, not just because they might teach them some fact or a message, but just the pure system of setting up rules and something to achieve, something to be good at, that gives you meaningful work, can be this incredibly therapeutic and happiness, generating thing. Something we stole from her and we, love to say all the time is that we think of our games as little engines of happiness, that they can provide this little spark in a player's day, that keeps them engaged with the game. Her main, concept is that it feels really good to be good at something. Another hero of mine from the business side of things is Tony Hsieh. And he's the CEO of an amazing company called Zappos that got acquired by Amazon for $1 billion a couple of years ago. So not small change. The interesting story behind him, though, is that he had had another massive acquisition before he even started or became part of Zappos. He sold his company for $40 million, and he had a part of that money that was actually vesting. So he had to wait a year or stay in the company for a year for it to vest and for him to be able to collect that $10 million paycheck. But he got to this point where he was waking up in the morning and he just kept on hitting snooze on his alarm clock too many times because he didn't want to go into work. He didn't believe in it anymore. He got past this point where the acquisition happened and it grew beyond a point where he could really control its destiny, and it had gone in a direction which he didn't really believe in anymore. And so he left. He walked away from $10 million when all he would have needed to do was sit at his desk and drink coffee for a year, because he knew that life was too short and he wanted to go on and do something which sort of fulfilled a destiny and made him actually happy. His realization was that profits are actually a very shallow form of satisfaction. And his book called Delivering Happiness is a fantastic portrayal of this story to find his purpose and the different layers in his sort of theory of how to approach life and business. Starting with profits. Obviously profits are very important. We need them to pay the bills. But once you actually satisfy that component, what's much more meaningful is finding the passion to be great at something to be really expert at, and most importantly, finding a purpose behind it all. And the purpose of Zappos became this theory of delivering happiness. His brand really stands for something. You should dive into it especially if you're interested in the ideas behind customer service. Another inspiration to me, and I always get crap about it, but I think he's great, is Tony Robbins, and he has a similar theory where what he calls the 6 human needs. And the interesting thing about this is there's very much a parallel to Tony Hsieh's 3 different levels, except that as opposed to profits, passion, and purpose, it's sort of like dependable certainty that you're going to be able to walk out the door and you're going to be able to breathe air and there's going to be water and food there and you're going to be able to get on with life without getting your basic sustenance. But once you've got that, the kick of that fades away very quickly, right? We don't go around day to day going, God damn, I'm so excited I can breathe. It'd be great if we did, but the reality is that to actually achieve true happiness, we look for higher levels of contribution and growth, love, significance. And the interesting thing about these 3 levels, which will relate back to our game design theories in a second, is that you've actually got conflicting impulses at each of those levels. So at the base, we're looking for certainty out the door every single day. We need to be able to depend on the fact that there is air to breathe and water to drink. But we're also looking for a surprise and variety to keep things exciting. So anyway, all of this thinking about motivational design, looking at all these different entrepreneurs and motivational psychologists, and thinking about how games had played a really important part of my upbringing, really got me thinking that perhaps game design is actually the same as motivational design, as lifestyle design. And when you think about it, it totally makes sense because, if we're trying to convince somebody to spend time in our game, then we need to convince them that it is a valuable return on their investment, whether it's time or money or whatever it is. They need to, decide that they're going to spend the time of their life in our game, for a good reason. So, yes, they can actually be these, sources of, emotional and intellectual sustenance. And the rest of this talk is going to be an exploration about how we can use those 3 levels, specifically in Flutter, to make the game a positive influence on people's lives and keep them coming back. But first, I'll just show you a quick trailer of how the game ended up. So as you can see, it's a very chilled out game. So the main goal in Flutter is to collect a bunch of different factually correct butterfly species in your rainforest environment. And so you've got responsibility for this place. You check back in on it multiple times a day. So just like with these little bursts that you can you take up in the line for a bust or sit down on your couch and play it for an hour and really get into the depths of how you attract and all these different real-life butterfly species. So interesting thing about the background of Flutter is that it started as a Facebook game. This was actually the first game that we made as part of Runaway. And we operated it on Facebook for about a year. And it did okay. For our first game, it was all right. But we saw the writing on the wall with Facebook pretty quickly, and we got out of there and decided to refocus all of our energy on iOS, which is where we were working with National Geographic. We got a hell of a lot of flack from it, from our audience, and that's when we learned to really just like pull the plaster off if you've got bad news to deliver, as opposed to trying to tease it out. But luckily, we managed to turn it all around, and the community that we built up on mobile is just as passionate, or every bit as passionate, and the game has been much more successful on iOS. But what do we want to do differently about Flutter on mobile as opposed to on Facebook? Well, firstly, we knew that the Facebook version was too broad. It was trying to be too many things to too many people. We had adventure elements in it when you would roam through the forest and discover new areas. We had decoration spaces where you could create your own like visually different section of the rainforest. And for a small team, it was just trying to do way, way, way too much. It felt like we were constantly trying to lay tracks in front of a train, like to keep the community engaged and keep the whole thing fresh. So for a start, we decided that Flutter was purely going to be about the life cycle of a butterfly in this one screen. We knew that we wanted it to be this thing, that, as I said before, this little engine of happiness, that it could, provide this immediate satisfaction, just sort of like when somebody pulled it out of their pocket, we really knew how we wanted someone to react. We wanted them, if they're having a bit of a bum day, for it to put a smile on their face, for it to be full of light and color, and to be this really fun thing to pull out of your pocket. We wanted to keep the genuine connection to nature, so that was very important for us, that all the species in the game were real life species. And it was going to be this time based on, as I said before, on iOS. When I say social mobile, it means that the game is free to download. It relies on social networks to connect with your friends and have social currencies, and that we're starting on iOS and then moving on to Android. We have a premium currency in the game as well, which is where the money comes from, which people use to advance through the game quicker. Okay, so back to these three different levels, what Tony Hsieh called profits, passion, and purpose. I'm going to start off with and relate back into direct game design terms. So on the first layer, the equivalent of profits, or that sustenance that our friend Tony Robbins was talking about, really in a game, the immediacy, like importance of an immediacy mechanic, is that like no-brainer click when you bring an app out of your pocket, right? When somebody sees your app icon on the screen, or they think in the back of their mind, oh, I should check out on my butterflies, the first thing they should know is that they're going to get some progression through the game just by opening it. All right, like they shouldn't have to put any brain power into those first few taps. Because like if they think, oh Christ, like I'd love to be able to progress in that game, but I've had a really shitty day and I really can't be bothered dealing with all those complex mechanics right now. Like you're just going to lose so much of it, like, especially if it's a mainstream audience. So you've got to make sure that there's that, dependable progress, even if someone just wants to come in for 10 seconds and tap some butterflies and feel good about themselves and then move on. As we know, though, that quick thrill wears off quickly. So the second tier is where we actually start to get some beef into the game and start to make something which people think has actually got some character and depth. The counterpoint to that certainty, though, is the surprise thing. We call it, the instant Kiwi effect. So having a chance roll in the game is also very important, and it's in that immediacy layer. So not something that they really need to think about at all, but that anticipation of perhaps getting something really cool out of a card pack, or in our case, this frog. You pick up treats to feed him in the forest, and he sticks his tongue out into the environment and grabs your flower, and there's a chance that might be an incredibly rare sort of thing. So it's this mindless thing where you can just crank through, but like every now and again he gives you something really cool, and again that's just preying on sounds wrong, but like the impulse to want to come back into the game and just like tick along. But these two, like those two mechanics work really together to become the legwork of the game, what you spend most of the time doing. All right, so but once you've like got those mechanics in there and they look really pretty and you touch on the butterflies and light comes in the environment and sparkles and things and it's all really great, you've got to make sure there's a really, really clear goal, to the game that, like within seconds of somebody starting the game or before they've even downloaded it, before they've even started to engage with it, they understand very clearly what the point is, like what are they actually moving towards? What are all those little interactions about, and what ultimate goal are they actually satisfying? So in game and in Flutter, it's all about species discovery. All right, so the design of this is threaded through the entire and the entire game, and this real focus on filling in gaps has become more and more the centerpiece of the whole game. And so we decided early on, and we definitely pivoted a couple of times in the game's central focus. But we definitely realize, learning from the original game where it was about adventuring and all these different sorts of things. Here it needed to have one central purpose, and that needed to be reflected in every element of the gameplay. So you can see here, this Flutterpedia page is like half full. It's very clear what I've got to do to progress through the game. So not only, but if you set something which is like outlandishly difficult, like finishing Ninja Gaiden or something, like the casual game is just really not going to get it. You need to have our collections are broken up into sets, so you have these like milestones where you completed the set and you get a special decoration reward and things, and it doesn't feel completely insurmountable. There's another interesting point about is that the definition of the goal of our game started before you even played it, like and the sort of the feeling that we wanted to elicit in the player. By calling the game Butterfly Sanctuary, it became very clear that it was this little place where you were taking care of these guys. So even when you're thinking about your game's name, there's all those subtle little clues which can not only convince them to play it up front, but what they think about, what their expectations are that what the game is going to be. If that doesn't follow through, like to the title, to the actual gameplay, then that's a potential disconnect, and people, you'll lose people in those transitions. Okay, so my favorite part of the whole game design process is developing, and I call it a fiction here, which is a little bit wrong because obviously all of our creatures are factually correct. But when I talk about a game's fiction, I mean all of the rule sets, all of the different characters, all the different environments, all the different screens, all the different things that someone needs to learn to become a master at this game. So this relates back to Jane McGonigal's whole theory, that it feels great to be good at something, right? Whether that's being good at running or baseball or Flutter, like if you get to that point where you have this really intense knowledge of a system and you're able to apply it and talk to your friends about that and like coach your friends through it, that just feels really cool. So like learning about in our game the different sets, the different sizes, and how to use in particular flowers in the game to attract the right species is really important to progressing through the game quickly. So again, it's all about giving the player something which they can become really good at. The fiction, though, is also very important to scale up in its complexity really gently. So one thing I think we've done well in Flutter is at the start of the game, it's really simple to attract new species. They're coming in all the time, and then gently we make it more complex for you to, we have the variety of different sizes, variety of different species, variety of rarities. And so the way that you use flowers to attract different butterflies becomes a lot more complex and dependent on understanding the subtleties of that mechanic. There's also a mission mechanic in it which relies on you knowing all of the background of the different species, which again just rewards your research into the game and knowing it better. I'm going to have to really fire through these, sorry. Okay, so another interesting thing, with this layer, and as opposed to loading up the game just to see pretty effects, is convincing the player that this place is alive. That when they think about potentially going into Flutter, they think about their phone and they're like, oh, this is little ecosystem going on, this stuff happening. I want to go and check in and see what these guys have been up to. I want to see what my friends have been doing. And having that feeling that you're really needed, that you're going to be appreciated, that the place is going to light up and it's going to be happy to see you. Building on that, is the idea, of this, and this is a really big time sort of, new thing for the games industry as we, present these products as a service, games as a service these days. But building on people's fear of missing out. All right, like the idea that something new is happening in the game every day, that there are these events going on, these valuable virtual objects, these limited time butterfly sets and things. That's the biggest for us driver of revenue, and one of the the biggest things that drives people back into the game. So big time driver of retention and revenue. Alrighty, so once you've got that immediacy layer and you've got the second layer of a really compelling world fiction and something which people want to keep on checking back on because they think it's really alive, it's time to start thinking about the purpose of the game, its connection and relevance to the game outside of itself. And that starts with friends. Giving your friends the ability to obviously help each other out in the game, that makes the game a conversation. All right, having a really active Facebook feed where people are talking about different theories in the game. You should see the list of different things that people think that make the game better, or advance the theories and imagination that people put into this is confounding, but really fun, and it's great for them to be able to share that and to be able to theorize together. I'm just going to skip over the slide because I'm running out of time. Another element where we connect the game into the real world is through our charity connections. So we have a real world crossover with the World Wildlife Fund. We're just about to get it going for iPhone and for Android. But in the Facebook version, what we did is we actually, through player engagement in a special event, we raised enough money to build 8 of these Brazil nut storage houses in the real Bolivian Amazon. And that dramatically reduced the spoilage of sustainable crops for a community of farmers who are trying to set an example in Bolivia of how to sustainably farm the Amazon as opposed to just slash and burning it. Right? So for us, what that the bonus was that we got our players to feel really genuinely connected to a real world sustainability issue, but it also gave our whole differentiator of being based in the real natural world some credibility, and it gave us a good marketing opportunity and things. So we sacrificed a little bit of revenue for, I think, a lot of goodwill. We also have connections with real world museums, both in Otago and in San Francisco. We just ran a big event at the California Academy of Sciences. And so the cool thing here is that we can have this matchup where they can find a species in the game and then they can actually go and see it in real life. And at the Cal Academy of Sciences, we had this night where we had the game set up on people's iPads, and all the species in the game were the species that were actually in the butterfly house. So they could go around and actually see them in the game, see them in real life, and kind of just, again, reinforce that differentiator of ours. My favorite story, though, about the benefit of the game being based in the real world is about its potential to bring people together. And there was this great story we got from one of our players where she said that she walked in the hallway of her grandmother's place, and she'd been down that hallway a million times before in her life. But this one day she stopped and she looked at the wall and she suddenly went, oh, that's a Raja Brooks birdwing, that's a tiger wing, that's a blue morpho, and things, and rattles off all the names of the of these butterfly specimens that her grandma had on the wall. And it was just cool on so many different levels, because not only did she feel great about applying that knowledge that she'd learned in the game in a real world scenario, but it also brought her and her grandmother together around a shared interest they didn't know that they had. And then suddenly she's showing her grandmother the game, and they're into it together, and they're talking about butterfly species and stuff. And I mean, that's cool from like a touchy-feely point of view, but it's also amazing from like a commercial and a creative point of view, because that sort of connection, you can't buy that. Like advertising can't buy you that sort of brand connection and connection to your virtual world. All right, so what are we doing now? Obviously continue to build on all 3 of these layers. Like, games are a totally different space to what they were 10 years ago. They are now the service, these evolving worlds that we have to constantly monitor and iterate on and expand and add new characters and species and things. We just finished laying out a series of events and and limited sets in the game for the next year. And we hope that Flutter will be as active as it is now, if not more so, for at least the next couple of years. And then, given that the game is done well, and we feel that we have the sort of commercial proof that this differentiator is something to develop further, we're looking at expanding the portfolio even further from here. So the idea is that we take everything that worked about Flutter, but then next we're applying it under the sea. So you're going to be able to go and collect fish and build a coral reef and things. But then next it might be dinosaurs or the Arctic or all these sorts of things. So it's really, really cool, like, to, after having had a couple of bats at this, have found a model which we think is replicable, and to have that very focused differentiator, and what will result in a portfolio of games which players can move between over years, and we can really develop a brand which stands for something and retains players for a lifetime. That's it.
Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, we've got time for about 2 questions. So we'll take 2 questions, and then Tim is very approachable, so in the breaks and bits and pieces, jump on his ear and show it out.
Yeah, happy to.
Tim, could you quickly explain how you're monetizing successfully Flutter, which is actually a free app?
Sure. Okay, so yeah, the question was, how do we monetize the game since it's a free download? The way that we do it is there's a premium currency in the game called Flutterbucks, and those Flutterbucks can be used to advance timers that you're waiting on. So whether that's the waiting for an egg to hatch or a butterfly to be ready to harvest again, or expanding out new space for your environment. So a very important lesson that we've learned over the last year in that economy which relies on premium currency or like paid optional extras, is to think of it as an economy of time, like to not put up any like paywalls, to not say, hey, this content is only for paying players. Instead to think, okay, everything in the game is accessible and through just passionate, play, like spending your time, but you can substitute in cash for that time. That means that you're not restricting your really passionate players who just have a philosophical problem with paying, but you're also meaning that like people that are cash rich and time poor can just get in and blitz through it all and have just as much fun.
The size of your team and contract artists or in-house artists,
Yeah, so okay, our team at the moment is myself on production design. We have 3 full-time programmers, and then we have 1 full-time artist. At the moment we're engaging 1 full-time contracting artist as well. But yes, we're very into outsourcing and being able to use that resource to expand and contract as the particular game or projects require it.
Okay, so?
how do you find artists?
How do we find artists? Our artist who's responsible for all the prettiest stuff is an interesting story, which I have no time for, but you can ask me later. But I mean, really just online. We are open to working with anybody. We love to see portfolios. So if there are artists out there, then we'd love to see them. And we're especially like to work with New Zealanders. So yeah, just send us your stuff. Oh, can I say one last thing? We are hiring. We are looking for 2 full-time game developers, a gameplay programmer and a platform programmer, and we've also got 2 internship opportunities over the summer, and we are looking for a full-time community manager / online marketer. So if you know anybody that would be interested in one of those roles, or you yourself would be interested, then please get in touch with me. That's my email address right there.
Well done, Tim. Thank you.